everyone, and welcome to Women in MSE, the second installment of the four-part outreach webinar series organized by the Department of Materials Science and Engineering at NUS. I am Richa, and I will be your host for today's session. Consistently ranked among the top globally by Times Higher Education and QS, MSE at NUS has made extensive contributions and breakthroughs in education, innovation, and research, clinching numerous awards both locally and globally. With cutting-edge research in areas such as advanced manufacturing, bio-inspired materials, edge computing, and computational material sciences, as well as world-renowned faculty members such as Professor Konstantin Novoselov, Prof. Sylvia Gregchek, and Prof. Barbaros Ozilmas. It is unsurprising that MSE at NUS is one of the leading MSE departments in Asia. Before we begin, let me briefly introduce the Outreach webinar series. As part of the MSE Roadshow, this four-part series is organized with the aim of raising awareness and showcasing the diverse roles and career opportunities available to MSE graduates. Over the next few weeks, several distinguished speakers from various fields will each give a talk on the career pathways that they have embarked on. This webinar will be split into two parts, the first being the talk by the invited speakers, followed by the Q&A session where the panel of speakers, including Prof. Daniel Blackwood, Deputy Head for Education and Student Affairs in MSE, will answer questions posed by members of the audience. Members of the audience may submit their questions in the webinar Q&A at any time and indicate if they would like a specific speaker to answer their question. Do also remember to complete the survey when prompted at the end of the webinar. So to kick off today's webinar, let's please invite Prof. Blackwood to give his opening address. Prof. Blackwood, please.
Should unmute myself. Okay, and welcome to the Department of Materials Science and Engineering at the National University of Singapore. I will just give a short overview of the department and then hand it over to our guest speakers. Okay, a little bit of the background of the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. We actually started as a program back in 1991, a program between the Department of Physics and Department of Chemistry. They came together and started a program in materials science. And that became a fully fledged department in the Faculty of Science in 1996. It was actually in May of 1996. I arrived in Singapore in April of 1996, and 2 weeks later that the department was formed. So I've been here longer than most of you have been alive, so how old I am. Then in 2005, there was a decision to actually move materials science from the Faculty of Science to the Faculty of Engineering because it's quite an applied topic and they felt it fit better in engineering. So in 2005, the current Materials Science and Engineering department was actually born. And then in 2022, the Faculty of Engineering merged with the Buildings faculty, and we became the College of Design and Engineering. Well, that did not have a strong impact on MSE itself. As we've been growing, when I first came here, we only had 4 faculty members. Now we've got over 30, and we've expanded, and we've managed to attract top people into the field. And we have the only Nobel Prize winner to be working in Singapore, Sir Kostya Novoselov. And the government's also been impressed that he's here because they've contributed to a $200 million institute. It's the world's first institute dedicated to functional intelligent materials. Okay, so the government is investing heavily in materials because they believe materials science and engineering holds the future for Singapore. We've also attracted a number of other top researchers. Every year, there are various rankings around the world, and they say which researchers are most cited by their peers. Worldwide, there's just over 6,600. And in NUS, there are 32 such researchers, and our department has 5. So we've got, what's that? About 15% of the top researchers in NUS are in material science and engineering, yet our faculty number makes up only about 5 or 6% of the total faculty. So that shows that we have a high quality here. much as you go back. Ben T is actually a local Singaporean, which is always good to see amongst the top people. Engineering as a whole, not just our department, but the whole of engineering in NUS is actually ranked #1 in Asia by the Times Higher Education. We're 8th in the world. So education is the main focus of our talk, and it's a major focus in our department. So it's good to see that we're the top school for engineering in Asia. There are other rankings like QS rankings, and their material science and engineering department, we are 7th in the world. But within that QS rankings, the only ranking that really matters to you as undergraduates is the employer reputation. And NUS is #1 in Asia for employer reputation within the QS rankings. Right, a lot of the other parts of the rankings are research reputation and things, which are not so vital to undergrads, but to you, for when you leave here and get a job, we are #1 amongst the employers. Some of you may not yet know what material science and engineering is. We're really a mixture of all the sciences, particularly chemistry and physics, but biology is becoming more important as biomedical applications become more important into materials. So we combine physics and chemistry. So that's how I said the department started as a program between chemistry and physics, but we're also a lot more applied than the normal science, right? So if you like science and you want it to be useful, then material science is a good choice. So that's why we also have the engineering part, which is the applied part, where we look at energy and sustainability, we look at biomaterials, soft robotics, we're also doing things on 2D materials, quantum computing is part of material science. So all these new areas are part of what we actually do here. At the moment, we offer 4 specializations. So when you come here, on top of your degree, you can take a specialization. At the moment, our 4 specializations are biomedical materials, where we actually have joined forces with the Department of Biomedical Engineering. Okay, so you would take some courses offered by them, and their students take some courses offered by us. We also still have one in nanotechnology, one in artificial intelligence. This is very much tied to that new $200 million institute that's just been opened. And also we have a specialization in renewable energy and sustainability. And coming soon, we'll have a specialization in robotics. This is a specialization where 4 departments have come together in the Faculty of Engineering: biomedical, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and materials engineering have all come together to offer this specialization in robotics. It will be around soon. By the time you register in August, it will be available. So at MSE in NUS, we have top-notch education. We've got a strong curriculum, which you can ask me more questions on individual parts of the curriculum if you like at the end of the talk. We're doing cutting-edge research in a number of frontier areas, bioengineering, nanoelectronics, even quantum materials. And we have good contacts with local industry and industrial partners, and we're expanding our alumni network. The alumni network is important for you to be able to get a job later. And in terms of research, where do we focus? Well, energy and sustainability is a very important topic, so we're focused heavily in that. Artificial intelligence and data analytics, which also are part of the curriculum. We focus heavily on that in our research. Biomedical materials and soft robotics, we have a number of people working on that. And advanced materials and microelectronics. There is still a very large electronics industry in Singapore, and a lot of our students still work in that area. Perhaps what you might be interested in is, am I going to get a job when I graduate? Well, the answer is very likely. The last time the MOE did a survey of our recent graduates, they found that nearly 92% were employed within the first 6 months. I think the other 8% were taking a holiday before they actually went into the workforce. The amount of money you might earn, it's around $4,000 is the starting point, is the mean, which puts us about on the par with the other engineering departments within NUS and slightly above our competitors at another university, which is a little bit to the west of us. Okay. And these are some of the employers of our graduates, right? You'll see that some of them are strong materials. Applied Materials, obviously, materials company. ST Engineering, they do a lot of defense, and so a lot of materials involved in the defense. Saint Gobain is a French company, more famous for glass, but they do a lot of other materials. 3M is a big company there. But you also find that we have companies that are more known in the chemical industry employing our graduates, like Bayer, Procter & Gamble. And some go off into banking, right? Probably they earn more money in banking, but the banks like the analytical skills that you will learn while you're doing an engineering. Okay? More recently, many of our students have gone off into the aerospace industry. There's a growing aerospace industry in Singapore. It's not designing airplanes, it's about the materials that are required to repair the airplanes or keep the airplanes in flight. Several go off to research institutes. So microelectronics is still a big employer. Micron opened a new fab only a couple of years ago. Some go off into into petrochemicals, and then into the energy industry. So there's a wide, diverse number of employers. And that's one of the great things about material science and engineering, is it's used by all industry. So it doesn't really matter what the hot area is when you graduate, because it's very hard to tell what's going to be hot in 4 years' time. You know that that industry will at least be employing material science and engineering graduates. And I will leave it with this last slide, which says when our next talks will be, right? Our next one will be on functional intelligent materials and robotics, how the materials help with robotics. And with the final one will be on renewable energy and sustainability, where materials really does play a key role. And I'll let you flash you can take the QR code. I'll give you a couple of seconds for that. And then I think that was my last slide. Yes, so I will stop share and hand you back to our host to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Prof. Blackwood, for sharing about our department and the opportunities available to students here. So in today's webinar, we are fortunate to have with us 3 remarkable NUS alumni who will grant us a sneak peek into their experience in the material science and engineering field. They are Prof. Shuang Fang Lim, Dr. You Tihan, and Alyssa Chan. Thank you so much for joining us today. First up, we would like to invite Prof. Lim from North Carolina University. She graduated from NUS MSE before pursuing her PhD at the University of Cambridge. She is the first to report on the observation of solid-state anti-Stokes shifted room temperature superfluorescence in the smallest ever observed SF media at the single nanocrystal level. Her research also showed that the nanocrystals can produce a pulse sequence with a fixed time interval, indicating that they could potentially become quantum optical timers. Prof. Lim, please.
Hello, thanks for inviting me to the seminar. I have very fond memories of NUS because me and Ben, Prof. Ng Weibing, we are actually from the same class of 96. So I'm very happy to see that the department has made such huge progress. Okay, so let me share screen and talk a little bit about what I am doing. So I have to apologize that my PowerPoint isn't working really well. So we'll just have to see the screen like that. The display isn't working super well. Since I left NUS, I went to Cambridge where I did my PhD, and that's when I started going into photonics in a big way. And I'm still a photonics person, but currently it's a quantum photonics stuff. So what I am presenting today is a new material, which is based on rare earths. So what exactly is superfluorescence? So I need to define that. So let me do that. Okay. So let me try to, that doesn't really work. Okay, so what exactly is superfluorescence? So superfluorescence is a kind of phenomena, right, that is due to the atomic interactions. So we have in this crystal that's highly doped with F element rare earth materials, so the dopant, right? So these dopant, if you dope them at a very high concentration, so each atom is a dipole, and so the dipoles will start emitting light, right, but randomly. So dipoles are randomly aligned, but when they emit light, each dipole will interact with the radiated light and with each other. And that is when they self-synchronize and they form a macroscopic dipole. So to the right of the arrow, you see a macroscopic dipole. And that means that instead of a single dipole moment, you have a huge dipole with the n times the dipole moment of each individual dipole. And so that means that the emission is like a super burst. You get a super burst of emission, and the intensity scales as n squared, which is the number of dipoles, and the lifetime is also extremely short. So that means that it scales as the 1 over n of the spontaneous emission. And the interesting thing is that because if you see that this is actually very dependent on dipole alignment, that any sort of disturbances like the ambient temperature, the phonon relaxation is going to disrupt the alignment. So typically superfluorescence has only been seen in gases and also at very low temperatures. So what we have achieved here is to see the superfluorescent emission in a solid and also at room temperature, and also anti-Stokes shifted, which means that if we excite it at low energy, it will emit at a higher energy. So how do we make this possible? So we achieve this with materials design, right? So we have, we make an informed guess of the type of material that we want to use. And also we use the rare earth, which is based on neodymium. And we dope the nanocrystals at almost 90% concentration. So this is to force the ions to be localized as close as possible. So we have estimated the spacing between ions, which is about the wavelength of the emission, which is on the order of lambda, which is the emission wavelength. And so this causes the interaction or crosstalk between the ions. And this crosstalk is called cross-relaxation. So this cross-relaxation is enabling the ions to talk to each other so that they can self-synchronize. And so rare earth ions are really special because they are buried under the S and P orbitals, so that they are basically not as easily disrupted by the ambient environment. So they are shielded. Okay? So superfluorescence is different from lasing because in lasing, you do not have this macroscopic dipole formation, right? It amplifies spontaneous emission, and you don't have this dependence on the pump power, and you also don't have this disruption by the external environment, which is mostly thermal fluctuations and so on. And the superfluorescence has spectral characteristics which are different from lasing in the sense that there is a time delay before it happens, because you need time for the dipoles to self-synchronize or to align. And another interesting spectral feature that we will show is Burnham-Chow ringing. So we'll come to see what ringing is all about. So this is the structure of our crystal, which is a core shell crystal. So we have the neodymium in the outer shell, which is the pink layer. As we've seen, this is the TEM image, the elemental mapping, and we have erbium in the core. So we designed this so that we can see the spontaneous isotropic emission, which is the non-coherent emission, and the coherent emission at the same time, so that we can compare. So this is our optical setup. So in the optical setup, we have an inverted epifluorescent microscope, and this is coupled to an Nd:YAG laser. And we have and then the emission is then coupled to the monochromator, and then we can take the spectral emission and the time to resolve decay at the same time. So they're taken simultaneously. And our samples are dispersed on a alphanumeric slide so that we can identify the location of each crystal by SEM first, and so that we can map the crystal location and the crystal dimension and the crystal orientation. So we know exactly which crystal, what crystal size, and what orientation we're actually looking at. So we're doing single crystal imaging. So this is an example of a single crystal that we're going to show today. So this is a crystal on grid A1, right? So we know exactly in the SEM image, this is what the crystal looks like, what's the shape, the size, and the orientation. And so that is the particular crystal that we looked at, and this is the spectra. So this is the spectra you can see. So to our surprise, so it was kind of unexpected. So we did see that the crystal emission within the first 2 microseconds, we get a very sharp spectral feature with the peak at 590 nanometers, which we attribute to neodymium. So I can show you later, that's the proof that it's from neodymium. And then after 2 microseconds, we get a totally different spectrum. And so we realize that there are 2 separate processes, optical processes happening within the single crystal. And one is a fast emission and one's a slow emission. And the lifetimes are different too. So the lifetime of the fast emission, which is superfluorescence, 10,000 times faster than the normal upconversion emission. And this is taken at room temperature. So to show that this is due to neodymium doping, we've taken we synthesized different samples. So we have the core shell where the neodymium is in the outermost shell, and to the top right panel, there is the outer shell is undoped. So there's no neodymium. And in the ICC sample, we have the neodymium shell, but no erbium inside. And in the bottom left, which is the neodymium core shell, which is we synthesize as crystal that's only a neodymium core. So we can see that for the sample that does not have any neodymium is virtually dark. We don't get any superfluorescence. So this superfluorescence is only attributed when neodymium is present. And we see that this superfluorescence is highly dependent on the environment, which is the temperature. So if you take a different crystal, measure a different crystal on a different day, then we do see superfluorescence of the single crystals, but the spectral feature may change, like you can see a shoulder. Right, so in superfluorescence 1, you see a shoulder because there's competition, right? So the alignment is easily disrupted by phonon processes, which is phonon relaxation processes. So we have to be careful in future to also control the temperature or design a crystal that's more resistant to phonon relaxation. So if we take measurements of aggregates or ensembles, we find that we have a spectral feature which is different. So the superfluorescent peak at 590 is broadened because if each individual crystal emits superfluorescence at a slightly different wavelength, so you have a superposition, and this gives a broadening effect. So these, instead of a super sharp peak, we get of 2 nanometer spectral width, we get a much larger spectral width because there's overlapping superfluorescent peaks. And when we measure the lifetime of the samples, we do see that we have, again, the fast component and the slow component. So the fast component, which is a very narrow spectral peak, that's just on the right, you get a very narrow spectral peak. And then if we zoom in on the very narrow spectral peak, we see periodic ringing, right? So we see oscillatory fluorescence. So you see 1, 2, and 3 peaks. So that means that this is termed as Burnham-Chow ringing. So Burnham-Chow ringing occurs because of the crystal dimension. So we have a large active volume. The emitted superfluorescent light is reabsorbed by the crystal, and then is then re-emitted, and then the re-emitted light is again reabsorbed again. And so this creates periodic peaks. So you can have 1, 2, 3, and even 4 peaks, and slowly the intensity slowly drops. So what is interesting to us is that this Burnham-Chow ringing, the period is about 350 nanoseconds, which means that this is closely matching optical transistors. So our plan is to develop these crystals as optical timers. So the time resolved decay, again, is shown like in the previous slide. We can see that Burnham-Chow ringing happens. So if you look at the right panel, which is the decay of the aggregates versus a single crystal. So in the single crystal, we don't see this ringing effect, but in the aggregate, we see multiple peaks, right, which is oscillatory fluorescence. And the number of peaks you see is dependent on the size of the aggregate. So it is of interest to us to design crystals, to grow crystals which are as big as possible so that we can observe more of this Burnham-Chow ringing, and to develop this into a useful optical transistor in the future. And this Burnham-Chow ringing is dependent on the active volume. So if we measure dimers, which is 2 single crystals, or if we measure trimers, which is 3 single crystals, we do not see this ringing. So this ringing only happens if the crystal gets bigger, way bigger. So we are in the process of synthesizing crystals which are micron size and trying to observe and control the Burnham-Chow ringing, the period of the ringing, and the number of peaks that we see. So this ringing is also highly dependent on the pump power, and I think I can skip this. And that's because if the pump power is too low, the emission intensity is too low to be reabsorbed again. So we need to have sufficient emission intensity to be reabsorbed by the crystal. So in order to determine the number of ions that are actively involved in the superfluorescence burst, which is the average number of coupled emitters, because we know that we have clusters of ions which are closely spaced together. So this is necessary, so they're closely spaced together so that they can have this crosstalk about how many of them are actually involved. So we did some calculations from our data. And so if we fit the decay curves at the high pump power and low pump power, we see different lifetimes. And the lifetime at the lower pump power, which is much slower, is 568 nanosecond. And the lifetime when we have a much higher pump power is about 48 nanosecond. So you take the fraction, which is we take the ratio between the two of them, and we estimate that about 10 to 11 ions are involved in each superfluorescence burst. Right? So this is from our data. And also to show that this superfluorescence is highly dependent on the spacing between the ions. So what happens if we decrease the concentration of the neodymium ion? So as we decrease the concentration to 20% neodymium doping, the intensity drops to about 1% of the former levels. And if we drop the neodymium concentration to 1%, we see no superfluorescence whatsoever. So therefore, this neodymium is is the origin of superfluorescence, but the spacing of the ions also really important. So we also show that if we decrease the concentration of the neodymium ions, not only does the intensity decrease, but you also see that there is a greater time delay. Because if the ions are spaced further apart, it takes a longer time for them to crosstalk and interact with each other, and also to synchronize, for them to align together. So therefore, this concentration and the spacing, particularly the spacing between the ions, is super important. So we also did a calculation of what the spacing between ions should be. And so we use Blase's equation. And so using Blase's equation, we already know what is the critical activated concentration, which is the critical concentration is 20%. And below 20%, we don't see any superfluorescence. And so we know the type of crystal structure we have. So we know the N number. And so we know the cell volume. So from our calculation, we estimate that the spacing between ions to have sufficient spacing, which is very close, so that we can get some sort of superfluorescence, is at least 9 angstrom or 0.9 nanometers. And we can also estimate the number of ions, a theoretical estimation of the number of ions which are involved in these superfluorescence bursts. So from our calculation, we get a value of between 8 to 9, which is close to the number of 10 to 11 that we got from our data. So we can say that we have around 10 ions which is involved in the cluster, 10 ions within the neodymium cluster, ion cluster that contributes to the superfluorescent effect. And so in the future work, we are also working on optimizing our particle design, and we are also working on the temperature effects, because the temperature will disrupt the alignment of the dipoles. So, thanks for giving me the time to share my work. And I really have to compliment my postdocs for doing such important work. And then, so I have my postdoc, which is Corey. So, and also Kai. So the both of them are dads. So they work hard on their work, which is their research, and also they are good dads and take care of their families. My collaborators are Hans Helen from the physics department at NC State, and Prof. Gang at the University of Massachusetts. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Lim, for that informative sharing. Do note that there will be a Q&A session towards the end where you can ask our speakers any burning questions that you may have. We will now proceed to our next speaker for today, Dr. You Tihan. Dr. Yu completed her PhD here at NUS MSE. She is currently a Principal Process Integration Engineer in the Technology and Development Department of Global Foundries, Singapore. She works on the back end of line process integration for STT-MRAM development and production. Her team jointly developed the world's first commercial MRAM product with Everspin technology. Their product was installed into the Mars Perseverance rover, launched by NASA in 2020. She has also led the tape-out for the world's fastest STT-MRAM in 2021. Dr. Yu, please.
Hi, thank you for introducing me. Let me share my screen. Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, what do you see now?
We actually got the presenter view.
Oh, okay. Let me try sharing it again. Can you see now?
It's a couple of seconds to get. Yes, now we can see the presentation view. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks for introducing me. I'm very honored here to be invited into this webinar, Women in NUS, Women in MSE. So I will be here sharing my what is MSE and my life as a material scientist. So this is a background of me. I graduated from NUS MSE as a bachelor, and then immediately I joined an industrial postgraduate program in NUS MSE to pursue my PhD studies. And then after I graduate, I joined Global Foundries Singapore as a technology and development process integration engineer. And I am also very fortunate to have a lovely family with 2 young children. Okay, I will start with why I choose MSE as my major. And all of you here reminds me of the days many years ago when I tried to choose my major. And when you choose your university major, you may be very clear that what you are going to do for the rest of your life. But for me, it was not the case. So rule of the thumb for me is I need to choose something that is I'm good at, and also I like. So I think further, I was good at science and math, and I also like to do hands-on activities such as building models and solving puzzles. So I decided to do something related to science and engineering. Then I started to think, among all the engineering majors, which one is the most useful and impactful major? In 2008, the National Academy of Engineering identified 14 grand challenges for engineering in the 21st century. These are the problems we have to solve for continuous progress or survival. The bolded ones are the ones require the attention from material engineering. So in the end, I have made my mind to join MSE and hoping that I can become someone who contributes to these challenges. Then I started my MSE learning journey. What I learned in MSE can be summarized into this diagram. We learned about the structure of material. I believe terms like FCC, BCC, some of you may be familiarized. I learned about the properties of materials, like the electronic, magnetic, mechanical properties, and so on. The material processing is very important to determine the properties of material. And the properties of material can determine the performance and applications of the materials. They are interdependent on each other. Changing one of them may lead to the changes of all other 3. And the characterization of material is also very interesting. It serves like eyes of scientists. With these eyes, scientists can see through the material and evaluate whether it meets the performance criteria they want. After 4 years of study, I found that if I want to become a real material scientist, I need to drilling further into the field of research. So I spent 4.5 years in a project related to magnetic random access memories. I grow the film grow the sample, then characterize the structure of the sample. Then I make it into a device that is in the micrometer scale, and then test its performance and properties. It is an extension of what I've learned on paper. It is also about a material processing, characterization, structures, properties, performances. But on top of that, I gained a lot of hands-on opportunities, experiences. And also I had a lot of data analysis practice. Then I joined GlobalFoundries as a process integration engineer, PI. This is roughly my workflow. My team developed the process flow jointly with the customer. Then we discuss with the module engineers to process our product in our fab. Then at certain steps, we check the quality of the products. If it is not okay, we will need to find out the root cause and come out with improvement plans. If those products are severely impacted by this problem, then we need to scrap the products. Okay, if everything goes fine, we can send the products to testing, and we collect the data, analyze the data. We come out with continuous improvement plan, and then feedback to the next round of production. As a PI engineer, I am exposed to the whole process from the beginning, from the blanket wafer to the end product. There are many thousands of steps. So I have a whole picture of the process. I also learned a lot of, improved my communication skills because I need to communicate with our external customer and also the internal module engineers. Also, I have acquired data processing and analysis skills for huge amount of data we get from the products. Do I use what I learned in MSE for research and work? It's definitely yes. I use a lot of characterization methods like TEM, XRD, EDX in my work. I also learned about microelectronic processes, which is very closely related to my work. Electronic and the magnetic properties of the materials helps me to understand my product well. Of course, there are a lot more. Knowledge I learned and the experience I gained in NUS MSE helped me to pick up my work tasks very fast. Now, think of what I have shared with you just now, the knowledge I have learned, the PhD project I have done, and the work I did. You will realize that all of them can be done equally well by women and men. That is why the percentage of women working in STEM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, has generally increased over the past 5 decades. I believe you can be one of the women working in STEM as well. You may wonder that, are women disadvantaged in my field? Maybe women are just the supporting roles for the men bosses. This is a big no. All engineers are judged equally by their expertise, regardless of their gender. Women are given equal opportunities. You can see these are the 2 big women bosses in my company. They are equally capable and respected. There are also many activities to engage women engineers. You get support and advices from those who are more experienced in these activities. However, having said that women and men are equal in STEM, the truth is women are still the minority in my work and the research group. Most of the time, I'm the only lady among men. So what is it like to be the only woman in the room? Firstly, I would say I'm very proud to be one of the women working in men-dominated industries. I can do equally well and sometimes better than men. I am more patient and more detail-oriented. At the same time, I also have concern on this current situation. If the industry is supportive, if the lady bosses and I can manage it, why the percentage of women in engineering is still low? Is it the stereotype, or is it something else like the family? So my personal experience is that you don't have to choose between family and career. You can balance both. This picture is me past my PhD oral defense, and at the same time, I was 8 months pregnant with my first child. And the second picture is me, promoted to principal engineer last year. And at the same time, I delivered my second child. I can do this because I get good support from my family and my company. I have very supportive husband. He shares the housework with me, and he can take good care of the kids when I am busy. My company gives 20 weeks of maternity leave, which is 4 weeks longer than most of the other companies. And my boss allows me to work from home for the most of the time when my kids are small. I'm very, very grateful for all the understanding and support from my family and the company. At the same time, I also make sure I perform to my best in my work. If I can do that, I believe you can do it in the future too. This is the last slide I have today. I want you to pause and think. 1,000 years ago, our ancestors used stone and iron as tools to hunt. Now we also make use of these materials in chips. The sources of material has not changed, but now they can help us to achieve much more than 1,000 years ago. What has changed is actually the knowledge we acquire, the more advanced social system and more equality between people that allow more talents to work in the more suitable positions. What has changed is us. It comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and feel free to approach me if you have any question. My email is also attached here for your reference. Thank you very much for your attention once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yu, for such an interesting sharing. I'm sure our audience, myself included, are amazed by the insights that you have shared with us today. We will now invite our final speaker for today, Alyssa Chan. Alyssa is a recent alumnus of NUS and is a product and development engineer at HP. During her time in NUS, she took her passion and knowledge in material science to solve different problem statements posed by various competitions. She clinched the top place for the SDG Young Leaders Award organized by CDL, GCNS, and Samsung Solve for Tomorrow. Some solutions that she came up with include a 2-part integrated solar energy system and end-of-life waste management of solar panels and wind turbines. Alyssa, please.
Thank you, Richa, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Today, I'll be talking about some of my experiences in NUS MSE. So here's a little more about myself before we start. If you have any questions that you want to ask in future about MSE or NUS, my Telegram handle is attached there, so feel free to drop me a message. I just obtained my degree in material science with a second major in innovation and design which is basically design thinking or product design for those who do not know. Before that, I graduated from Nanyang Polytechnic under Nanotechnology and Material Science in 2019. I also stayed in Raffles Hall for 3 years of my uni life, where I had several CCAs such as photography and videography. And currently, I'm working at HP Inc. as a process and product engineer. Now, why did I choose NUS MSE? The main reason for me is because it's a mix of many fields, mainly chemistry, physics, and engineering. And because I would like to call myself the jack of all trades and master of none, I thought this major was perfect for me. Firstly, I will address why I chose MSE. It can be applied to many fields, such as forensics, biomedical, chemical industries, and many more. I also find it to be really cool, especially how different materials behave in the nanoscale. So one example is as shown. These are all the same materials, but depending on the particle size and dimensions, they can appear as completely different colors. I also find smart materials to be really interesting, especially the mechanism of how shape memory alloys can return to its original form once heat is being applied. But these are just surface level stuff. It gets more interesting as you dive deeper into the topic. As to why I chose NUS is because they offer the Innovation and Design program, which is, as mentioned, my second major. One of the best things I've experienced during my poly days were the projects, how I can apply my problem-solving skills, creativity, and technical knowledge to produce working prototypes. IDP allows me to not only do just that, but provides resources, advices, and support along the way as well. I'll show you some of the projects I've done in the later slides. NUS also has the MSE Club, which allows me to be able to interact with my peers as there is more to university than just academics. Personally, I would want to enjoy the last step of my education journey thoroughly, experiencing new activities along the way. I've made many valuable friends along the way, which has helped me in times of need, especially because I have short-term memory and tend to forget things, so they would remind me of things like module registration and upcoming tests or assignments that are due. Lastly, I wouldn't deny that NUS rankings have affected my choice as well, with NUS being well known around the world, providing countless and excellent research opportunities. I'm sure many of you are wondering what's it like being in uni, and I'll share some of the key things that I've enjoyed so far. Some things I particularly enjoyed about MSE so far is the hands-on work that we get to do, which includes lab sessions. There are several lab modules you get to take. These modules will solely be based on lab work and reports, so it's actually pretty fun for me. These are just some of the lab works done during the MSE lab mods, which include 3D printing, tensile tests, hardness tests, and UVB spectroscopy. I've also done some projects as well for my second major, which includes a year-long project for self-balancing motorcycle and some CubeSat projects under the Space Systems module. And for my final year project, I worked on a project that was more related to MSE, which is lightweight rims for the NUS Formula SAE race car. The scope of the project explores different materials to be used, and I used simulation software to analyze the results. So I actually have to apply the knowledge learned from MSE to analyze which materials is best suited for the rim. I also wanted to do something more beyond my academics, and that was when I decided to enter competitions to gain more exposure in the field. Also, I'm not going to deny that the prizes for these competitions were attractive as well. Needless to say, the technical knowledge gained from MSE has helped me a lot. Some competitions that I won was the recent SDG Young Leaders Award, just last year, when my team was attached to a company called Vina Energy. They gave us a challenge statement and we had to come up with and pitch sustainable solutions to a panel of judges. One example where MSE has helped me was to solve the issue of decommissioned solar panels. I took a module regarding solar cells, and it helped me come up with several sustainable solutions, such as combining the technology of luminescent solar panels and dye-sensitized solar cells to reduce toxic waste from decommissioned solar panels. I was also the champion for Samsung Solve for Tomorrow competition 2022, where I pitched a sustainable two-part integrated solar energy system in regard to the challenge statement that they posted. Of course, I didn't always come in first place for competitions. I was only the cluster champion for Schneider Electric's Go Green Challenge, and first runner-up for NUS ID case competition. And there were some competitions that I didn't even get through the first stage. But the key to winning these competitions is to learn from the failures and learn from the teams that have won the competitions that I didn't. All these competitions would be blasted out in NUS email, so you can keep a lookout for it and maybe win some of them. I also have several internship experiences. In total, I did 3 internships during the summer break, and NUS has a portal called Talent Connect, where you can apply for internships which can be useful. The first internship was in Scorpio Electric, where I did materials research, simulations, and proposed design changes to their electric motorcycle prototype. I also did an internship at Defense Science Organization, researching on oxidation protection coating and ultra-high temperature ceramics. And for the last internship, I was working in HP on their multi-jet fusion 3D printers, which I actually converted to a full-time role. I've come to the end of my presentations, and thank you, and hope this talk is helpful.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing about your experience here at NUS MSE. Thank you so much, Prof. So with that, we have now come to the end of today's session. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the speakers for taking time out of their busy schedule to come and attend today's session. And a special thanks to Prof. Lim for joining us all the way from North Carolina, despite the time difference. So to our audience, thank you so much for your participation. We hope that this session has been fruitful for you. We look forward to seeing you in the upcoming session, which will be on functional intelligent materials and robotics, and this will be on 15th February. Please take a moment to complete the short survey, which will appear right as you exit the webinar, and do also scan the QR code on the left to join the MSE Discord or the one on the right to find out more, and contact us if you have any further questions. Thank you and have a good day.